Someone dragged this busboy out of my event. People like him don't belong at a table like this. God, ma'am, the guest knocked into me. I was clearing the plates. Clearing? Get on your knees and wipe that floor. Use your apron if you have to. Oh, my wine. Clumsy hands ruin everything. You're done. Security. Check his bag on the way out. His kind always pockets things. You might want to reconsider that, Miss Harlow. Gah. A threat from the help. That's a first. Out. Gah. Good evening, Miss Harlow. Please sit down. You look like you've seen a ghost. Your security. You work for me. They work for me now. I acquired controlling interest in Harlow Group this morning. Your office, your title, and your employment contract all belong to that conversation now. Gah, that's impossible. You're a busboy. God, I was. Just long enough to find out exactly who you are when no one you respect is watching. This is how a dishwasher dissolved a dynasty in 48 hours. 4:30 in the morning, downtown Vancouver. The Pemberton Hotel stood 19 floors above Burrard Street, its glass face holding the last dark before sunrise. The loading bay on the east side was already open. Crates of produce, racks of clean linen, a cart of polished glasses moving on wheels that needed oil. Inside the kitchen, one man worked the dish station alone. Caleb Osei, 44 years old, gray kitchen shirt, sleeves folded twice at the wrist. His hands moved through the hot water in slow, practiced pulls. The smell of industrial soap and citrus rinse agent drifted through the stainless steel air. Somewhere above him, the hotel breathed its early morning breath. Ice machine cycling, elevator cables shifting, a vacuum running on the third floor where checkout guests had left their rooms. He paused at the pass-through and looked at the stack of plates waiting. 22 years ago, a woman named Caleb Osei ran this same station on the overnight shift. She worked doubles through the Canadian winters. Her knuckles cracked and red, her feet wrapped in pharmacy insoles. She replaced every 3 months. She raised her son on a dishwasher's wage and a community library card in a one-bedroom apartment in East Vancouver where the radiator knocked all night. On Caleb's right wrist, just above the waterline of the sink, sat her ring, a thin band of yellow gold, too small for any of his fingers, threaded onto a length of kitchen's twine and tied there. The knot was fraying. He had retied it 6 times. He would retie it again. By 5:30, the hotel began its real work. Caleb knew the names of everyone who arrived through the staff entrance. He knew Marco from the breakfast line took his first coffee standing over the sink before he spoke to anyone. He knew Paulette from housekeeping had a granddaughter starting kindergarten in September. People in gray shirts learn the architecture of a building from the inside. Nobody thinks to ask what they've memorized. The Pemberton had 2 staircases. The marble one in the lobby carried guests in robes and roller bags. The fire stair beside the laundry room carried staff, deliveries, and anyone the lobby wasn't designed to see. Caleb used the fire stair. He listened. In 2 months, he had heard more on that stairwell than any quarterly report could compress. A sous chef describing the way her overtime disappeared from her stub. A banquet server crying quietly on the landing between 11 and 12. The names of 3 people who had raised concerns with HR and were no longer on the schedule. At 6, his phone buzzed inside his locker in the back hall. He closed the door before answering. A woman's voice came through, measured and unhurried. Clearwater closes Thursday. The lawyers are ready. Are you certain you want to stay invisible another week? Caleb looked at the shelf above the lockers. A row of spare aprons, a bottle of hand cream someone had left, a birthday card taped to the metal. 1 more week, he said. I want to see the whole thing from the floor before I change any of it. A pause. You know what you're going to find. I know. But knowing from a report and knowing from inside a kitchen are 2 different kinds of knowing. He put the phone away and went back to the dish station. At 7:15, the lobby door opened. Renata Harlow came through the staff corridor the way weather comes through a cracked window, fast, cold, drawing everything toward her. General manager for 5 years, owner on paper for 3, she wore a charcoal blazer and carried a coffee she had not bought at the hotel. She passed the kitchen window without a glance inside. Caleb watched her through the pass-through glass, the way you watch something you've already decided about. She was 41 years old. Industry press called her a turnaround specialist. 3 hotels in 10 years, each one profitable within 18 months of her arrival. What the press didn't print was the other number. Average staff tenure under her management, 11 months. The people who stocked her minibar and laundered her conference linens tracked her moods the way sailors track low-pressure systems, with their bodies, before any instrument confirmed it. That week, the entire hotel hummed about one thing: the Harlow Foundation Gala. Every June, Renata commandeered the hotel's ballroom and garden terrace for what the invitations called an evening for youth in need. 200 guests, a live string ensemble, a silent auction, and a paddle raise that had hit 7 figures twice. The foundation's name was her family's name. The photos always featured her. The charitable registration, Caleb had learned from a document that was technically public but rarely read, listed her as sole director with signing authority over all disbursements. In the staff hall, a handwritten sign asked for additional gala support: extra shifts, overtime rate, formal dress code. Caleb signed at the bottom of the list. His floor supervisor, a compact woman named Greta, who had been running banquet ops for 11 years, looked at the list and then looked at him. She had the expression of someone who has watched a thing go wrong before. "You sure?" Renata gets particular at these. Caleb clicked the pen closed. "I've worked particular before," he said. "I want to see particular from close up." Thursday evening came in gold and blue. The sun dropped long over English Bay, and the first town cars arrived at the hotel entrance before 6. Caleb knotted his white service shirt in the staff room that smelled of pressed fabric and someone's takeout leftovers. Through the window, he could see the terrace taking shape, white tablecloths going down, candles being lit in glass holders, the string ensemble setting up under a canopy strung with warm bulbs. 200 guests. One night. One busboy nobody planned to remember. The terrace was the kind of beautiful that takes 3 days of labor to make look effortless. Candles in hurricane glass down the center of every table. Flower arrangements that cost more than a week of Caleb's wage apiece. Guests arriving in wool and silk, moving between champagne trays, with the ease of people for whom champagne trays have always simply appeared. Members of the provincial legislature, hospital board chairs, a man whose face Caleb recognized from a television series filmed locally, and at the center of all of it, in a deep burgundy gown with her hair up, stood Renata Harlow, glowing in a way that had nothing to do with the candlelight. Caleb worked the back edge of the terrace. His job was straightforward: clear finished plates from the outer tables, restock the bread stations, keep the service lanes moving. He carried racks of clean glassware from the kitchen corridor to the bar stations. He swept a broken flute near the garden entrance before anyone stepped on it. Sweat gathered between his shoulder blades under the service shirt. He didn't mind it. He had worked harder in cleaner circumstances and learned less. At one of the outer tables, he met a young woman named Priya, 20 years old, a catering temp saving for her 2nd year of nursing school. She moved with the careful speed of someone who could not afford to make a mistake. When Caleb helped her lift a tray that had been stacked too high by someone else, she looked at him sideways. "You're the one who knows where everything is," she said. "Greta told me to ask you if I couldn't find something." Caleb steadied the tray. "Everything's somewhere," he said. "You just have to know which door to open." She almost smiled. It was the most relaxed she had looked all night. At 8:45, Renata took the podium on the garden steps. A spotlight found her with the precision of something rehearsed. She spoke about children at risk, about the gap between privilege and possibility, about what it means to use what you've been given. Her voice caught in 2 places, both of them the same 2 places it had caught last year, according to Marco, who had worked every gala for 4 years. The applause was immediate and generous. 60 phones rose to record her. Behind the bar station, Caleb stacked ramekins and listened to a woman describe a generosity he had never once seen her exercise toward anyone who couldn't advance her interests. The paddle race ran 40 minutes and pulled in just under $1 million. A ski chalet in Whistler. A private dinner for 12 prepared by a chef whose name was on a waiting list. A weekend on a sailing vessel named after Renata's late mother, which Caleb noted was also tax-deductible under a leaseback arrangement he had found in the foundation's filings. The children the foundation served appeared on a projection screen. Photographs, smiling, unnamed. They were the backdrop. The number on the digital display was the point. Nobody in the audience asked what happened to last year's number. Then the paddle race ended, and the champagne flowed with more intention. Near the south end of the terrace, a bread station had run low. A server waved Caleb over. Just one basket, from the warming rack inside to the table. 30 feet, nothing more. Caleb lifted the tray and started across the edge of the dance area where two couples had begun to move to the ensemble's waltz. He was 15 feet from the table when it happened. A heavy-set man in a linen blazer stepped backward into the path without looking, laughing at something his companion had said, his champagne flute held wide for emphasis. The shoulder caught the edge of the tray. A pitcher of water, 2 glasses of red wine, and a basket of rolls went sideways. The water hit the terrace stones. The wine went wide. Across the white tablecloth, along the sleeve of a woman in a cream jacket seated nearby, and down the front of Caleb's service shirt. The sound cut through the waltz. The ensemble stumbled and stopped. 200 heads turned toward the sound of glass on stone. The man who had stepped backward had already turned back to his companion, his expression untroubled. Caleb was already crouching, gathering the larger pieces of glass with careful hands, keeping the shards on the tray. The woman in the cream jacket was blotting her sleeve with her napkin and telling him, quietly and genuinely, that it was entirely fine. These things happen. Please don't worry. It could have finished there. A mop, a fresh tablecloth, 10 minutes, and the waltz picking back up where it had stopped. But a spotlight was already moving across the terrace. Renata Harlow crossed the garden with her cordless microphone still warm in her hand. She looked at the spill on the stones. She looked at Caleb, crouching in it, and her expression arranged itself into something she had probably mistaken her whole life for authority. She raised the microphone. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it seems the service staff have decided to redecorate the terrace. A few people laughed, reflexively, the way people laugh when someone with a microphone expects them to. Caleb rose to his feet. Ma'am, the guest walked into the tray. I'll have this cleaned up in 10 minutes. There's no damage to anything that matters. Renata tilted her head. 200 people watched. She turned to them first, half smiling, then back to him. Did we hear that correctly? She let the word hang. It talks back. She gestured at the wine on the stones. Tell me your name, please. Slowly, so the whole room can follow along. Caleb Osei. Banquet service. Evening shift. Banquet service. She repeated it as though she were reading a footnote from a document she had already decided to discard. And does banquet service know what this terrace costs to maintain? She did not wait. The stonework alone is imported. The tablecloths are Belgian linen. That is more than you earn in a month, I'd imagine. Her voice dropped a register, the way voices do when they've found what they wanted to say and no longer need to perform reaching for it. My father always said you can put a uniform on anyone. It doesn't make them a professional. She stepped closer. The burgundy gown moved with her. If you want to finish this shift, get down and wipe that up. Now, use your apron. The terrace went quiet, not the polite quiet of people waiting for a speech. The held breath quiet of people who know they are watching something they will need to decide later whether they witnessed. Caleb looked at the spill. He looked at her. He knelt, not because he was undone, but because some people understand that kneeling is not the same as yielding, and that the distance from the floor gives you a clearer view of what's standing over you. He folded the service cloth and worked the wine in careful circles. Renata watched him for a moment. Then she lifted a full glass of red wine from the tray of a passing server. She held it out over his head and tipped it, slowly, all the way. The wine ran through his hair, down the back of his collar, across the stones he had just wiped clean. My hand slipped, she said into the microphone. 200 guests. A summer night. Stone imported from somewhere warmer. 16 words she would spend the rest of her life trying to unsay. Nobody laughed this time. In the back row of tables, a man named Stuart Webb, 23 years on various corporate boards, including 2 charitable foundations, set down his champagne flute and did not pick it up again. Beside him, a woman he recognized as a deputy minister shifted in her chair. The ensemble had not resumed playing. The silence had weight. At the bar station, Priya stood frozen with her phone at her side. She had been recording for 4 minutes. Her hands were not shaking. They were very, very still, the way hands go still when the body understands that the moment requires steadiness. She did not know, in that moment, how much those 4 minutes would be worth. She kept the frame steady anyway. 314 seconds of footage, every word audible. Caleb rose. The wine dripped from his collar onto the clean stones. He squared his shoulders and faced her. Not with heat, with something more durable than heat. Renata Harlow mistook the silence for her own. She usually did. She turned to the room, arms open, the way people open their arms when they believe they have already won. "This is a foundation event," she said. "This is a night about lifting people up." She looked back at Caleb and let each word find its own weight. And some people, no matter how many opportunities they're handed, simply don't belong at the table. She turned to the head of her security detail, a man named Bryce, who had worked the hotel's senior floors for 8 years. She said his name once. He came forward. "You're dismissed," she told Caleb. "Not at the end of the shift. Right now, in front of everyone. Consider it a lesson in reading the room. Bryce, please see him out, and check his bag at the door. These events attract light fingers." Bryce came through the terrace like a man carrying out an order he already regretted. He gripped Caleb's arm. Caleb didn't pull away. He looked past Bryce directly at Renata, and he said quietly, almost gently, in a voice that the microphone barely reached, "You may want to take a breath before your Monday morning, Miss Harlow." Something moved behind her eyes. Then the evening and the spotlight washed it back down. She laughed once into the microphone, thin and bright as crystal. "Out." She signaled the ensemble. They played. The walk to the service exit took 3 minutes. Caleb's spine stayed straight. Wine dried sticky at the back of his neck. Bryce said nothing. 200 guests found reasons to look at their tablecloths. They were 10 steps from the door when Renata's voice came through Bryce's earpiece. "One more thing. Check his bag thoroughly. These people always take something." Bryce stopped. He held out one hand, flat, and said nothing. He didn't need to. Priya, at the bar station, had not lowered her phone. Bryce unzipped the canvas bag and turned it over. What came out was this: a battered stainless steel thermos with electrical tape around the handle, a paperback with the spine worn white, a transit pass in a plastic sleeve, and a small envelope, sealed, with a name written on it in a woman's handwriting that was no longer current. "Caleb, when you're ready." Bryce held the envelope up to the terrace light. "Family?" he asked, and the word came out more dismissive than he intended. He flicked the envelope down. It landed face down on the stone. Caleb moved faster than he had moved all night. Not at Bryce, around him. He knelt on the terrace stone and picked up the envelope. He wiped the corner against his wine-stained sleeve. His jaw worked once and then was still. He slid the envelope into his shirt pocket against his chest and stood back up. "Satisfied?" he asked. His voice was level. The stone under his feet was the same stone his mother had mopped on the overnight shift for 16 years. Bryce straightened. He had found nothing, which was its own answer. "Get off the property," he said. "If I see you near the hotel before you're officially recalled, you're trespassing." The service exit opened. Caleb gathered his things one at a time without hurrying. He walked through, and the door shut behind him with the sound of a lock finding its tumbler. He walked the length of the alley to the street. Somewhere behind him, the ensemble found its footing again. The waltz resumed. The applause when it ended was lighter than it should have been. Back on the terrace, Renata retook the steps and raised her glass. "Friends," she said, "let's not let one rough note spoil an evening this beautiful." She smiled at the room. The room smiled back, the way rooms do when the alternative requires more courage. There are people in this world built to serve, and there are people built to lead. Tonight reminds us why we're here, to lift the ones who can't lift themselves, to know the difference. Stuart Webb did not smile. He set his napkin on the table, told his wife he needed some air, and walked the stone path alone toward the far end of the garden. He had sat on enough boards to know that what he had just watched was not a rough note. It was a disclosure. 4 blocks from the hotel, Caleb sat in his 12-year-old Civic with the windows down. June air moved through the car. The lights of the Burrard Bridge arched orange over the water. He took the envelope from his shirt pocket and held it under the dome light. His mother had left it with her lawyer, to be delivered when the deal closed. He hadn't opened it yet. He held it now in both hands, edges soft from being carried, and he thought about a woman mopping a hotel corridor at 4 in the morning, believing the building was worth the years she gave it. He picked up his phone. His lawyer, a woman named Catherine Yip, answered before the second ring. She was the kind of lawyer who keeps a second phone charged on her nightstand. "Caleb, it's past 11. I know. I'm sorry for the hour." A pause. "You don't sound sorry. You sound like you made a decision." Caleb looked through the windshield at the bridge lights. "Move the close to tomorrow morning," he said. "First thing, and file the board notice for Monday, 8 a.m. Pemberton boardroom." Catherine was quiet long enough that he could hear her sit up. "What happened tonight? I got dismissed." "Caleb, you own the property. I will by morning. The person who dismissed me has been dismissing people like me for 5 years. I spent 2 months watching from the inside. Tonight I wore the rest of it." He touched the envelope on the passenger seat. "Now I'm done watching. The sellers won't be pleased to move the close by a day," she said. "Then we make it worth moving. Offer the accelerated bonus we held back. Wire it tonight. They'll sign." He could hear her opening her laptop. "You understand what you're asking me to do before sunrise. You've had the documents staged for 10 days. A brief sound that was almost a laugh. "Yes, I have." "All right. Friday close, move to Saturday morning. Board notice Monday. Anything else?" "One thing. The notice has to come from the new controlling shareholder. Once I file, people will start asking who Northgate Capital is." Caleb looked at the bridge. Let them ask. They had 2 months to ask who was mopping their floors. Nobody did. They have until Monday to start wondering. While Caleb drove across the bridge, Priya sat on the steps of the hotel's service entrance, scrolling through her footage on her phone. 4 minutes and 3 seconds. Clean audio. She watched the wine pour in slow motion twice and felt each time the same drop in her stomach. She forwarded it to 2 friends with 3 words: "You need to see this." By the time she got on the bus, it had been forwarded 11 times. By Sunday morning, it lived in dozens of phones. Hotel staff watched it in groups in the break room. A front desk agent watched it alone at her kitchen table before her shift. A parking attendant who had worked the hotel for 9 years watched it and thought about his own mother. Nobody posted it publicly yet. Companies like the Harlow Group cast long shadows. But it moved under the surface, from hand to hand, the way important things move before they become undeniable. Word reached Bryce on Sunday afternoon. He texted Renata. "Some staff filmed Thursday. Should I follow up?" Her reply came in 6 seconds. "Follow up on what? I gave a masterclass in standards. Let them keep it for the memory." Bryce read it twice. He was paid to execute decisions, not to evaluate them. He poured himself a glass of water and watched the rain come in off the bay. At 9 Saturday morning, in a law office above a cafe on West Georgia Street, Caleb signed his name 37 times. The previous ownership group of the Pemberton Hotel, a family trust out of Calgary, 2 pension funds, and a real estate holding company, transferred their combined stake. When the last page crossed the table, Catherine capped her pen and looked at him over her glasses. 63%, she said. As of this morning, you own the Pemberton Hotel Group. Caleb could smell the cafe below them, the first roast of the day. Funny, he said. It smells like a place where people work. At noon, the emails went out. 6 board members received the same message from a firm none of them recognized. Northgate Capital, new controlling interest in the Pemberton Hotel Group, requests an emergency session. Monday, 8 a.m., executive boardroom, 19th floor. Attendance required. Agenda. Leadership review. Within an hour, every board member was calling every other board member. Nobody knew the name. Nobody could attach a face to it. The Pemberton Family Trust had been quietly offering its stake for over a year, but the rumor had been that no serious buyer had emerged. Stuart Webb read the email twice on his back porch in West Vancouver, the inlet gray and quiet behind him. Controlling interest. He thought about Thursday night, the wine pouring. The envelope flicked off the stone, a man standing back up from the floor of his own mother's workplace. Stuart set down his mug and said to the water, "Monday morning can't come soon enough." Renata spent her Sunday selecting photographs from the gala for the foundation's social channels. She posted 8. Her favorite showed her mid-speech, one hand raised, the terrace lights blazing behind her. The caption read, "Because every child deserves a seat at the table." She read the board email between posts and dismissed it as an activist shareholder flexing new paper. She had handled 2 of those in 5 years. She approved her own speaking notes for the Monday session and arranged a car for 7:45. She was bringing the foundation's annual report, which she knew by memory. She fell asleep before 10. Certain Monday was hers. 12 kilometers away, a man in a quiet apartment on the east side pressed his mother's letter flat on the table beside his cufflinks. He had read it once, sitting in his car the night before, and he did not need to read it again. He knew what she had believed. He was here to find out if she had been right. Monday morning came in low cloud off the Pacific. By 7:50, the 19th floor smelled of fresh coffee and the specific anxiety of people who know they have been summoned, but not why. Board members gathered in the hall, talking in low voices, trading theories. Stuart Webb stood apart at the window, watching Burrard Street wake below him. At 7:58, the elevator opened. Catherine Yip stepped out first, briefcase in hand, reading glasses already on. Behind her came a man that 2 of the board members almost recognized. Almost. The way you almost recognize someone you have only ever seen from the wrong angle. He was wearing a charcoal suit. On his right wrist, visible at the cuff, was a thin gold ring on a length of kitchen twine. Renata arrived at 7:59. White blazer, her foundation's annual report under one arm, the expression of someone who has already written the agenda. She pushed through the boardroom doors talking. "Good morning, everyone. Let's make this brief. I have a hotel to run." She stopped. The room was arranged differently than she had ordered. 6 board members sat along one side of the table. A woman she did not recognize stood at the head, documents squared in front of her, face composed and entirely unimpressed. The chair at the far end had been turned toward the window. "Ms. Harlow, Catherine Yip, Counsel for Northgate Capital. Please take a seat." Renata didn't move. "Northgate Capital is what exactly?" "I don't negotiate with counsel. Bring me a principal or we reschedule." Catherine opened the folder without hurrying. As of 9:17 yesterday morning, Northgate Capital completed acquisition of 63% of the Pemberton Hotel Group, the Calgary Family Trust, the 2 pension accounts, the Reeves Street holding, all signed, all registered, all final. She slid a single page along the table. "With respect, Ms. Harlow, this is not your boardroom this morning." Renata's eyes moved down the page. Her mouth opened and then was controlled, back closed. "All right. Then show me the principal. I'll negotiate directly with whoever is behind this." Catherine almost smiled. "He's already in the room." The chair at the far end turned slowly. The leather creaked once. Morning light came in off the glass and fell across a charcoal suit, quiet hands, a fraying piece of kitchen twine on a gold ring. "Good evening, Miss Harlow," Caleb said. "Please sit down. You look like you could use a moment." The annual report slid out from under her arm and hit the floor. For 3 full seconds, nothing in the room moved. Then she laughed. One sharp sound because her mind had no other door to go through. You. How is this possible? You are a busboy. I was, Caleb said, for 2 months. Long enough to see what this hotel looks like from the floor. He stood and walked the length of the table. You told 200 people at your charity gala that some people are built to serve and some are built to lead, and that the job of the privileged is to know the difference. He stopped across from her. I'd like to tell you what I've learned from the service stairs. A board member, a man named Rutherford, who had been quiet the whole time, said it first. Osei, you're the one who built Osei Transport. Caleb nodded once. Started it with one refrigerated truck and a government contract nobody else wanted to bid on. Sold it 4 years ago. He set his mother's envelope on the table, facing the room. My mother, Abena Osei, worked the overnight cleaning shift at this hotel for 16 years. She believed it was a place worth her time. I came to find out if she was right, the only way that produces an honest answer. He stopped opposite Renata, from the floor. In 2 months, I learned that 2 catering supervisors have been systematically shorted on overtime, and that both of them raised it with HR, and both of them were reclassified to casual status within 60 days. I learned that the Foundation's last 3 annual reports show cumulative donations of $2.4 million, and that less than 400,000 of that has reached any program serving any child anywhere. He paused. The rest moved through event costs, consulting fees, and a marine vessel lease invoiced under the Foundation's charitable number. The vessel is named after your mother. Catherine raised a small remote. The screen at the far end of the room came to life. 4 minutes and 3 seconds. Clean audio. The bread tray going sideways. Renata's voice over the microphone, rolling and deliberate, every word of it. The wine, tipped slowly, all the way, while Caleb knelt on the stone. The envelope flicked off the terrace floor. 2 board members looked away before it ended. Stuart Webb watched every second without moving. When the screen went dark, Renata's voice came back, tight, controlled, searching for the register that had always rescued her before. That footage is taken completely out of context. It was a private 300 guests, Catherine said quietly, and a cordless microphone. Which portion was private? Renata turned to the table. You've sat across from me for 5 years. You know my numbers. You know what this property has become under my management. You cannot seriously allow, she stopped. Because she had finally looked at their faces. 6 faces around the table, and not one of them offering her the thing she needed, which was a reason to keep talking. Stuart Webb opened a folder in front of him. Ms. Harlow, Section 9 of your employment agreement. The conduct clause in your second renewal. He read it without theater, the way men read things they have already decided. Any conduct, public or on company property, that occasions material reputational harm to the organization or its staff constitutes grounds for immediate termination for cause. He closed the folder. I was at the gala Thursday evening. I watched you pour wine on an employee's head in front of 300 guests while he was attempting to clean the floor you'd asked him to clean. The room tilted. The annual report lay where it had fallen. The numbers she had memorized, RevPAR up 18%, occupancy at a record. The story she had been planning to tell, none of it had a chair now. Caleb returned to the head of the table and rested his hands on the polished surface. Members of the board, he said, Northgate Capital calls a vote on the immediate termination of the chief executive for cause, effective this morning, and his voice stayed exactly where it had been all morning, level, unhurried, certain. You wanted everyone watching, so we're doing this the same way. Renata moved the way people move when they realize the door they came in through is no longer there. The laugh first, hollow, performing control. This is theater. You orchestrated this. Stuart, you've known me for. Nobody's face moved. Then the pivot, smooth as it had always been. Caleb. She dropped her voice. Thursday night, I'd been on my feet for 14 hours. The pressure of the event, the auction, The donors? If I had known who you were, I would never have. She heard the sentence leave her mouth. The room heard it. It sat in the air between them like something that had been waiting to be said. Caleb let it rest there for a moment. Then he nodded, slowly. "There it is," he said. "That's the whole of it, Miss Harlow. You needed to know my net worth to treat me like a person." He set his hand on the envelope on the table. "My mother cleaned this hotel for 16 years. Nobody important ever learned her last name. I don't have to imagine how she was treated. We just watched 4 minutes of what that looks like from the outside." Catherine called the vote in favor of termination for cause, effective immediately. Stuart's hand rose first, then the woman beside him, then the next. 6 hands around the table, each one quiet, each one final. Catherine noted each name without expression. Unanimous. Termination for cause under Section 9. All severance provisions, all unvested options, and all pending bonuses are forfeited under the cause determination. Renata's voice, when it came, had lost its register entirely. "You can't. I built this brand. I am the reason this property is worth what you just paid for it." She looked from face to face. "I'll litigate all of you. You're welcome to," Catherine said pleasantly. Discovery in that action would include the full foundation ledgers, the Gala footage, and 6 years of personnel files. We look forward to it. The math happened behind Renata's eyes. Lawyers know that math. The people on the other side of it never like the answer. Caleb turned to the door. "Please send in Mr. Bryce." Bryce entered with his shoulders back, scanning the room. He saw the envelope on the table. He saw the chair. His shoulders came down by degrees. "Mr. Bryce, Thursday evening, you searched a staff member's personal property without cause or consent on camera in front of witnesses. You're suspended as of this morning, pending investigation. Key card and radio on the table." Bryce looked at Renata. Whatever signal he was waiting for did not come. She was looking at the window. He unclipped the radio. He set it on the table with the careful movement of a man who has just understood that the order he was waiting for belonged to someone who is no longer issuing orders. The key card followed, 2 small sounds in a very quiet room. At the door he paused. No words came. Some people only discover that their authority was borrowed when the loan is called. Then it was her turn. Caleb did not raise his voice. "Miss Harlow, the security team will accompany you to collect personal effects from your office. Company property remains on site." 2 members of the hotel's security team, people who had held doors for her and carried her bags and said good morning to the floor rather than to her face, stepped forward. One of them said quietly, "Miss Harlow, this way." The elevator ride to her office and then down to the lobby took 19 floors twice. When the doors opened on the ground level, the morning shift was in full motion. Front desk, concierge, 2 housekeeping carts by the east corridor, the overnight cleaning team finishing their last pass. Word had already moved through the building the way it moves in buildings, bottom floor first, spreading up. Nobody stopped what they were doing. Nobody said anything. They simply did not look away as she walked the full length of the lobby in heels that sounded in that quiet, very loud. Near the main entrance, a section of the marble floor was still wet from the morning mop. A yellow sign stood beside it, the kind so ordinary it had become invisible. Renata's heel found the wet edge. She caught herself on the brass rail of a stanchion, steadying hard, her breath loud in the lobby quiet. The cleaning staff member who had placed the sign turned away politely and kept working. Renata Harlow straightened, walked the final 20 feet, and pushed through the revolving door into a June morning in Vancouver that had no record of her arrival. Upstairs, the boardroom exhaled. Stuart Webb shook Caleb's hand and held it a moment longer than the transaction required. "Your mother," he said. "I believe I may have seen her working. East corridor. She used to have music playing from a small radio." Caleb looked at him. "Every morning," he said, "mostly old Ghanaian gospel." She said, "Hotel marble carried sound the same way a church does. Something about the density." Stuart nodded and did not let go of the hand quite yet. Outside the glass, the city went about its Tuesday in full ignorance of what had just happened on the 19th floor. That would change. The footage broke publicly that same evening. Priya had been called by a national broadcaster who had received the clip from 3 separate sources. She agreed to license it. The number on the licensing check, when it arrived 3 weeks later, was more than her last 2 years of catering shifts combined. Attached to it was a handwritten note from Catherine Yip. You held the frame when everyone else was watching their shoes. The Pemberton would like to talk to you about your tuition. By the following morning, the 4 minutes and 3 seconds had been watched by everyone who needed to watch it. By the morning after that, everyone else had caught up. The wine tipped slowly, in slow motion, in a loop. The words underneath it, shared most often, were not the ones Renata had intended to be remembered by. The foundation collapsed faster than the career. 3 of its largest corporate sponsors issued statements of withdrawal within a week, each one noting, with the polished regret of organizations who had not watched the video until after a journalist called, that they were reassessing their charitable partnerships. The foundation's website went to a maintenance page. It did not return. Inside the hotel, Catherine's team opened the books with one instruction from Caleb: follow every dollar, no matter whose name it touches. What they found, over 6 weeks of work in a conference room that smelled of takeout and printer ink, confirmed what the stairwell had suggested. 7 terminations over 5 years, each one logged as restructuring, each one a black or brown employee. A catering supervisor let go 2 weeks after raising a wage complaint. A front desk manager dismissed for attitude after requesting a meeting about pay equity. A breakfast line cook terminated 9 days after reporting a slur from a senior manager. 7 files, 7 careers, the same approval on each one. The foundation ledgers told the second story. $2.4 million raised across 3 galas. Less than 400,000 delivered to any program, anywhere. The rest: event production, consulting retainers, a vessel lease, a property allowance categorized as outreach infrastructure. Charity as cover for a very particular kind of accounting. Caleb met 6 of the 7 in person. Each meeting began the same way, in the same boardroom, in the same chair. The company owes you an answer, and the company pays what it owes. 3 of them came back to work. The catering supervisor, who had been let go after her wage complaint, now runs the department that once erased her from the schedule. Renata settled everything 8 months after the gala. The terms were sealed. The conditions were not. A public statement, written and delivered on camera, in which she said, and Caleb believed she wrote this line herself because it had a texture her lawyer's prose never managed. I was not intoxicated by wine that evening. I was intoxicated by the certainty that no one in that room was going to stop me. No criminal sentence. There didn't need to be. What she lost was the only thing she had ever fully possessed. The rooms, the stage, the tables with her name at the head. The invitations stopped. The cameras found other subjects. She left Vancouver for somewhere smaller, where the people in line at the grocery store did not recognize her, and where she was, for the first time in her professional life, simply a person waiting her turn like everyone else. Inside the hotel, things loosened. Drivers got their back overtime with interest. Schedules stopped disappearing after staff raised concerns. The 7 who had been let go received more than checks. 3 received their positions back. 2 received positions better than the ones they had lost, and all 7 received a formal letter from the new chairman acknowledging, by name, what had been done and by whom. The first thing Caleb changed about the hotel's operations wasn't the executive structure or the revenue strategy. It was the pay scale, housekeeping, kitchen, parking, security, all of them. When a reporter asked him why he started there, he thought for a moment. Because I've worked both shifts in this building, he said. Only one of them needed fixing. A small bronze plaque went up in October beside the East Corridor where the overnight cleaning team begins their shift. The Caleb Osei Prize, annual bursaries for children of hotel service workers, full coverage, renewable. The first year's recipients were 12. The first name read aloud at the small ceremony in the lobby was Priya's. The Gala estate, a property the foundation had used rent-free under a charitable exemption that Catherine's team determined had never been properly filed, was returned to the hotel's balance sheet. The following June, the Pemberton held its first company gathering on the grounds. 900 employees and their families. Barbecue and lawn games where the silent auction had run. Children on the terrace where the string quartet had played. Nobody checked anyone's bag at the gate. And Caleb. Most mornings, early enough, you could find him in the east corridor before the executive floor opened. Charcoal jacket on a cart, sleeves folded, running a mop along the marble in the long, patient strokes that are the only way to do it properly, beside the small plaque on the wall with his mother's name. A new front desk agent saw it her first week and stopped the security guard she was standing beside. "Is that the chairman?" she whispered. The guard, a man named Dawson who had been there through 3 general managers, smiled at the corridor. "That's the overnight guy," he said. "Around here, they're the same thing. The twine on his wrist is new. He reties it every few months. Same knot his mother showed him when the old one frays through. The ring doesn't fit his finger. It never did. Some mornings, when the light in the east corridor hits it right, he hears marble the way she heard it. Not as a surface to be cleaned, but as something that holds sound long after the source has gone quiet. I'll tell you why I told this story. Because tonight, somewhere in this country, someone in a service uniform is being talked through like they're furniture by someone who has mistaken a title for a soul. And I need you to sit with this question. Really sit with it. If you were Caleb, standing on that terrace with wine running down the back of your neck, knowing that one sentence could end her career on the spot, would you have said it right there? Or would you have waited until Monday when the weight of it would be undeniable? Drop your answer below. I read everyone. And if this story landed anywhere real for you, share it with someone who puts on a uniform to go to work. A cleaner, a driver, a cook, a server, anyone who keeps a building running while the building pretends not to notice. They deserve to know someone sees them. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because stories like this one arrive here every week. And the next one might be about someone closer to home than you think. Until then, stand straight. The floor is not the lowest place in the room. It's where everything that matters gets built.